Hi everybody, Charmaine McGuffy here running for Sheriff of Hamilton County. Welcome to Lunchtime Live at Noon. I appreciate you all tuning in. I usually like to wait just a minute just to let everybody kind of get on, get the show revved up. And what great weather we're having. Wonderful, right? So thank you all for joining. Today what we're going to talk about is the specialized programs in the jail and how they help people, how they help prisoners. And not really just prisoners. I also want to tell you that they help the service people that bring the programs in. You know, it helps them to maintain their recovery. Some of them are in recovery. And it helps them to further their skill base and all of the things that they do. So I'm going to talk today about the specialized programs that we created when I was the major of the jail. And those programs, you know, benefited prisoners, and they, as I just talked about, also benefited the agencies and people that brought those programs in. But the other thing that helped with those programs, that the programs helped to do, was they helped to make our community safer. And we spent less tax dollars on incarceration when we used these programs. And I'll explain to you how all of that works. So first, I'd like to establish this. I am a law and order person. I absolutely am. I'm a law and order candidate. I believe that safe communities and orderly communities is something that we all want. That's something that everybody here in our tri-state area wants to embrace and live in safe communities. And I believe that some of the things that we do when people are incarcerated can actually help us with safe communities. And that's what this program is about. You know, I will say this, you know, there is punishment, there is consequence for behavior, and there is punishment, and so there should be. But there also should be a companion piece to punishment, and that is criminal justice reform. And that means moving people along in life so we don't have to continue to punish their behavior. What we want to do is encourage people, once they are in our custody, to change their behavior so that they don't return to incarceration, so that they can move on with their lives. And that's what we did in these efforts. I'll start out with a story. I always like to start out with a story. So, you know, I was out there years ago. We went to a man's house. I was on patrol. We went to a man's house, and we went there because he was on a court-ordered house arrest by the judge. He was a heroin addict, and we went into his house to check on him. And you know we know the places to look for paraphernalia and so forth, and we found drug paraphernalia. This young man was living with his parents. He had been involved in some trouble and so forth related to his addiction. And, you know, at that point in time, when we found that paraphernalia, I let him know. I said, you have to go to jail. You're going to be incarcerated now. And, he was so upset. I mean, he was crying and pleading with us and pleading with his dad. Please tell him not to arrest me. And I said, you know, this is my call. I'm the officer. I'm the police officer. You violated a judge's order, and you now have to go to jail. So we took him to jail, and he cried the whole way down and begged us and so forth. So he got into jail, he was booked in, and it was a few weeks later that I happened to be on an elevator in the jail, and I was with a few prisoners who were there being transported somewhere, and the elevator door opened, and here's this guy, here's this young man who I had arrested, and he's mopping the floor. And he sees me, and he runs over, and he holds the elevator door open, and he says, "Oh my God, I just want to tell you how happy I am, and thank you so much for everything you've done for me." And he's like, you know, he goes, I'm signed up for a program. I've been talking to my family, my mom and dad. He goes, I am so happy, like that. And I said, hey, you know, you're welcome, you know. So the elevator door shuts, and these prisoners, they're looking at me, and they're like, wait a minute. Did he just thank you for arresting him? And I said, yeah, actually, I think he did. And, you know, I saw that young man again in the credit union some months later, and he was in a recovery program, and he was doing well. And man, I tell you, it just means a lot when you can move people along in life. So, I want to talk about how the beginnings of all these programs started, and it started with WRAP, Working to Refer Appropriate Placement. I got a group of support staff supervisors, security supervisors, brought them to the table. We created the WRAP committee, and what we did is I said to these people, go out and find people who need to be here in this meeting. And we had that meeting once a week for years, and we had it at the same time, same place, so everybody could find us. And it was literally word of mouth. People heard about it and came. And we hosted agencies from all over the tri-state area. And quality people came to the table who were very passionate about helping people move on. You know who else came to the table? Incarcerated people came to the table. People who had been formerly incarcerated, people who had been formerly addicted, people who struggled in life with homelessness and mental health issues. Those people came to the table too, because they have a voice and they have ideas. Certainly they've been there, and we want to hear from them. So that's what we did. And one of the people that came to the table was a woman named Sister Kateri. And Sister Kateri, I really do wish they would, write a book about her. She was, oh my gosh, so fabulous. I have great stories about her. We may talk about her one time on Lunchtime Live. But at any rate, she worked with the veterans in our jail and was very passionate about that, had been embedded as a nun in various wars around the world. It was amazing. She has amazing history. So she came to our meeting, and one meeting she says to me, now look, this is what we need to do. We need to create this veterans pod, and here's how it works. And she showed it to me and so forth. And, I look around at the staff, and they're shaking their heads, and we're, well, no, we can't do it, sister. Sorry, it's just not possible for us to get these prisoners in this space and what have you. And, I knew right then that was the wrong answer, and that sister was not going to take no for an answer. And she didn't. And it was a few weeks later that I found myself sitting at that table telling sister, absolutely, we can do it. What would you like us to do, and how is it done? And that was the beginning. And she helped us create that veterans pod, and went to that pod. And that pod still exists today. It's a unit with like 16 men in it, minimum medium security. They're all vets. They struggle with housing, PTSD issues. They have so many things that they need help with to avoid incarceration. And so the people that came to that unit were fabulous. And I'll tell you, we had Joseph House, we had Talbert House. I'm going to give Laverne Sutton a shout out here. She's with Talbert House, and she works in housing. And what a wonderful, wonderful lady. Works magic with finding people, homes and housing and things like that. So thank you. And she's still working there today. Dick Rusha was a huge piece. He's an excellent support staff supervisor. He was a huge piece of that pod. Really brought a passion to it and kept it going even after I left. I know he did. He believes in it, and he's just a wonderful, wonderful guy. So thank you, Dick, for your efforts. So at any rate, we had all manner of different programming come to there. We had NA, AA. We tried to keep those guys busy. Chaplain Charlie came. Denise Driehaus came and visited the vets. She still comes back and visits the vets sometimes, because it shows that our county commissioner, Denise Driehaus, supports our efforts to move people to recovery. So the second thing we did is then, once we had that prototype, we decided, now let's look at addiction. And let's look at women who are addicted to heroin. And we began the efforts of opening the heroin recovery pod for women. And that pod was, again, a 16-person unit. We brought a number of people to the table. We had, spiritual people, ministers. We had cognitive therapy people. We had Cincinnati Works, how you find a job and so forth. We had Art for All People, which is a therapy-based art program. We had spiritual guidance people come in, and we had medical. Our medical staff came up and counseled these women and helped provide the Vivitrol and the Suboxone and things like that that need to, that some people need to move on. In fact, I'll give Maria Klug, who's our nursing supervisor, a shout out. She came up on her own time and taught yoga to the women who absolutely loved it and embraced it. And a person that I really need to talk about here with the Heroin Recovery Pod is a woman named Lisa Mertz. She came to the table. I'd never met her before. She heard about our efforts. She came to the table, and she is a woman who had struggled with addiction at some point in her life, and now created and helped create peer mentoring groups, so that you have peer mentoring groups that can move people along. And what a peer mentor is somebody who's been there, right? Somebody who knows what that's like, who's been clean, who's now changed their lives, who's now moved on from that sort of thing. And I tell you, she was so fabulous. She really, I have to credit her, was one of the people that really spurred me on to initiate this pod for the women, to get it going, and has just really continued to support this effort, even though I'm not there. She still meets with about 15 different women that came through that heroin recovery pod and are still clean today. Amazing. So at any rate, I did the heroin recovery pod, and it was a huge success, and it was such a success that the state's attorney general's office came down, sent people down to preview what we were doing. And not just with the heroin recovery pod, but also with something called then the exit pod. So the exit pod was created. Trina Jackson came to the table. She is a reentry specialist. She's the supervisor of reentry. And when she got that job, and it had been a few years after the RAP committee had started, and she started attending our RAP meetings. And then she said, you know what, we're going to make our own pod, our own unit. And she created the exit pod for men who have 3 months or less on their sentence. And those men then find out, with reentry's efforts and all the programs we can bring into them, how to get their driver's license back, how to pay their child support, how to get a job, and most importantly, that peer connection, people that they can call, people they can lean on when they leave incarceration. And I did ask Lisa Mertz, I said, why do you think our heroin recovery pod for the women was so successful? And she said this, and I respect her. Gosh, she had so much education and just so much experience surrounding this issue. And she said, it's because we approached it with a mind, body, and service model, which meant we took care of the whole person. We brought programming in, and this goes for every one of these efforts that we initiated. We brought programming in that addresses your state of mind. We brought programming in that helps you with your spirituality. We brought programming in that helps you be a service to yourself, that helps you learn how to get along in life and so forth. And I championed these programs. I fought to get them in there. At one point in time, and I'll just tell you a little short story about that. When I created the women's recovery program, 2 days before we were supposed to launch it, I was told to shut it down. I literally got a call from one of the sheriff's attorneys, and he said, "You're going to shut that program down." And I said, What do you mean we're going to shut it down? We've been building it for months and months and months. We're ready to launch. We have the women designated to go in, the whole, well, you're going to shut it down because we don't understand what it is. And I said, well, I've been talking about it for months. I don't know what happened in the command staff meetings when I started talking. I guess all those guys decided, they were going to think about where they were going to go to lunch. But anyway, what I'm saying is, then I directly went to the sheriff and I said, look, and I explained the whole situation, reminded him of all of the things that he had agreed to and to let us do and so forth. And then I got the green light to start that pod. So it wasn't always smooth sailing. There were lots of little bumps in the road. difficulties and things that we surmounted and got these things done. And here's a key factor about these recovery programs that we worked on so passionately. All these people I've mentioned and more. And if I didn't mention your name, please know that I appreciated your efforts, and I just don't have time to run through the list. But someday I'll put it out there on a list so everybody knows who all participated in this absolutely fabulous effort. So at any rate, the key factor to some of this, effort is the fact that we did not use any taxpayer dollars to make this happen. These programs, these units, these efforts with recovery happened free of charge to the taxpayer. And it's because we fashioned a program that included the community. What I learned, and I learned a lot through this effort, right? I learned a lot through this effort, and what I learned was that there are so many people out there, service agencies and individual people, who are ready, willing, and able to come and help us with this huge issue that we have of recovery, balancing punishment, balancing, trying to restore the whole person, restorative justice, sentencing, initiatives so that we don't over-punish people. I mean, there are so many ways that we can address all of these different issues we're facing now. And, quite frankly, and I tell people, it was a 1950s model. I saw that model. I worked in that model for many, many years. And the 1950s model is simply this. If the only tool you have is a hammer, everything's a nail. And, when I became the major, I wanted to move away from that model, and that's exactly what we did. And it wasn't just me. It was a lot of other people that came to the table to help. And I always like to give credit where credit's due. So in the end, I will build on this experience, with all the community relationships that I've developed and with the law enforcement efforts and, all of the efforts that we can create throughout our department. That's court service, that's law enforcement, that's jail. We can all make things happen and move in the right direction. And as the boss, as the leader, that's what I want to do. That's my pledge to the taxpayers and the voters of Hamilton County. And that is that we are all going to move in the same direction. We're going to listen to the community, and we're going to improve the safety of community. The time for criminal justice reform is now. It's right now. It's not on the horizon. It's not months away. It's now. And that's one of the reasons, one of the main reasons why I need to be the next sheriff of Hamilton County. Because I understand on a very basic level how all of these components connect. It's what I learned. It's what I did. And I want to continue those efforts because I know that that is what is going to help us move past this mass incarceration mess that we are dealing with in the United States. We incarcerate more people than any other nation or country. And, it's amazing because when you talk about the cost factor alone, it's wrong. When you talk about the moral toll that it takes on people to be incarcerated and never get your life back, that's morally wrong as well. So, I am a law enforcement person. I'm a law and order person. I believe in that. It's absolutely something that I grew up with in uniform, and I have enforced the laws. I've made those tough calls where there were people who had to be arrested. There were people who needed to be charged with a felony, and that's what I did, charge them with a felony. There were people who needed to be brought, kicking and screaming, literally, to jail. There are people who have to face the consequences of what their actions are, but then we need to address the whole person. So, Sydney Mucha says, what do you say to people who just think criminals should be punished and that we shouldn't spend money on making things better for them? Here's what I say, and that is a great question, Sydney. Thank you for that. Here's what I say to that. Look, People are punished, okay? I mean, that's inherent in the system. When you lose your freedom, when you're in handcuffs, you're in the back of that cruiser, that's punishment. When you walk into jail and you have to eat that food and sleep on that tiny little thin mattress on a piece of metal, right? And have people tell you when to get up and when to go to sleep and control your every move and every day, that's punishment. The reason we spend money on making things better for these prisoners is because they've already been punished and now we need to move them along. And you know, my mom was a very wise person, Bertie. She lived to 97 and she was in great shape all her life, worked very hard. She was a wonderful person. And this is, you know, towards the end of her life there, those last couple years, she was struggling with a little bit of dementia. And of course, I spent a lot of time with her. And whenever I would spend time with her, which was often, we would go through the same exact conversation every time, right? And the conversation went like this. She would look at me, because she still knew who I was, and she said, "Now, where do you work? What do you do for a living?" And I said, "Mom, I work in a jail." And she'd say, "You work in a jail?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I work in a jail. I supervise prisoners." And then she would think for a minute, and the very next thing she would say, every time, is she would look at me and she'd say, "Do you treat them good?" And I say, "Yes, Mom, I do." And then she'd look at me and say, "Do you tell them not to come back?" And I'd say, "Yes, Mom, I do." That is a wise woman. And I tell you, I'm so thankful for the time I spent with her. Oh my gosh, I wish you all could have known her. Everybody that ever met her liked her. And anyway, so that was Bertie McGuffy. But at any rate, I'd like to answer questions. How do you measure success with these programs? That is a great question. And what I'll point to is this. My conversation with Lisa Mertz, who is still very involved in the recovery business, who's very involved with the women who graduated, I call it that, out of our recovery unit in the jail. And the way that we measure it is this. There's 15 or so women there who came through our recovery program in the jail and are still clean. Now, it doesn't mean that some of them haven't fallen off the wagon a little bit, you know, taken a step back, fallen down, but they continue, and this is what she notes to me, they continue to call her, even when they're struggling, even when they've failed a bit, right? And that's really what recovery is all about. That's what I learned, is, you know, it's about a non-judgmental person who is going to help you time and time again. And that's what I learned from Lisa Mertz. I learned that from her. And, you know, by the way, I wanted to tell you, if you are inclined to want to contact any of these people I mentioned, please let me know on a private Facebook. I'd be happy to, you know, connect you and so forth. So, you know, they're fabulous people, and if you have some interest in helping them some way or talking to them, I certainly can connect you to them. So, at any rate, that's how we measure success. And I know that there are some cognitive programs out there, right, who want it in black and white, and they want those numbers, and how many numbers, and who did what. I measure my equity in people. That's what I measure equity in. In people, I measure how well these programs work because people come back and tell you they work, right? And when we talk about these programs working, how these programs benefit our community is really important. It's important because, you know, no one wants to be a ward of the state. Hi, Tashika, how are you? Tashika Wilson, good to see you on. Nobody wants to be a ward of the state. People want to move on in their life, and freedom is a very precious thing. And unless you've ever lost your freedom, you really don't understand how precious it is. I tell you who does understand how precious it is, every person that's ever been incarcerated. It's something that you can't put a price to. The ability to just wake up in the morning and do your own agenda, to walk outside and enjoy the fresh air, enjoy the rain, enjoy whatever the weather is. Your ability to, to interact with your family unencumbered, right? Because when you're incarcerated, that's another issue that we try to surmount, is the fact that you're so isolated. I mean, when you come to jail or go to prison, one of the consequences, and I think it is a punishment, is that you are away from your loved ones. I mean, just think about yourself, right? If right now today I said, and actually in COVID we can kind of relate to it, right? If I said right now today, you can't see your mom and dad, you can't see your grandmother, you can't see your children. If I said that to you right now today, how would that affect you? Emotionally, I mean, it would have some physical effects eventually, because it's a very life-altering and life-changing situation for you. So my goal as Sheriff of Hamilton County is going to be to address the entire system from law enforcement. And as I said, I've been in law enforcement. I've done some of the hard things of telling people, listen, we're going to take your liberty here because you've been doing the wrong thing and you need to do better. And I really do believe that when we need to do better, when we do better as law enforcement, let me be clear about that. When we do better as law enforcement, as the sheriff's office, we can expect other people to do better. And Michael Mority is on. Thank you, Michael, for watching. I so appreciate it. Very great. And I do want to tell you, it does remind me, too, of another story that I think is interesting and good to know about the Veterans Pod. So, we had this Veterans Pod going, and as I told you, it's very focused on PTSD, housing issues, and so forth. So one day I'm outside on the concourse, and I'm just, walking back from lunch, and this man walks up to me, and he's a pretty big guy, and he walks up to me, and he looks very happy and very pleasant, and he's very clean. He's got a clean white T-shirt on, brand new blue jeans. He just looks good. And he walks up to me and he says, hey, do you remember me? And I said, sort of. And he said, yeah. He said, I got out of the Veterans Pod. He said, I was in the Veterans Pod. He goes, and you know what? I have housing. He goes, when I left the Veterans Pod, they got me into housing. And I am so happy. And thank you so much. And he thanked me, And I tell you, those experiences, they let me know that people like Laverne Sutton, people like Dick Rusha, people like Lisa Mertz, people like Tracy Brumfield. I mean, I could go on and on with the list of names. Sarah Heldman, Art for All People. Those people are moving the mark, and they're making a difference. So I want to spend just a minute to talk about how these programs benefit our community. The fact that people can move along in their life and be productive increases the safety of our community. Particularly, let's look at women, okay? When women come out of that heroin recovery pod, just think about women in general, right? Women tend to keep all the details together for the family, right? The children, the parents, their caretakers. They make a huge difference in that family unit of how people how the kids can move along, making sure they get to school and all the things that go on. So when you take women and you help them recover from addiction that they're suffering from, and they're healthy again, think of all the people's lives they touch, and all the children's lives they touch, and the men's lives that they touch. And that is a way that we move community forward in a positive direction. So I want to talk about tax dollars. So our tax dollars are so important. When we talk about the community, it's about tax dollars as well, how that benefits our community, because, we all pay taxes. Our taxes rise as there's a need. What I want to do is I want to run, as sheriff, our law enforcement institutions to be businesses, efficient businesses. I want them to be efficient. I want them to put out the product. The product is people come in, they don't come back. that kind of thing. I want them to be efficient on the front end so that law enforcement, if you come to the attention of law enforcement's going to do the right thing. And they're going to decide what the right thing is to do, and they will be doing the right thing. I believe in law enforcement. We need the police. I believe in that. I was the police. And, you know, those are benefits to our society. So I do have a quick question. We hear you talk about how much you plan to do and how much we need to do for the prisoners. Outside of a job and paycheck, what are your plans to take care of your deputies? During the COVID in the beginning, I can tell you personally, it bothered a lot of deputies that our current sheriff was feeding and taking care of other organizations, but wasn't doing anything for his own officers, not even an email of thank you. That's a thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that, whoever that is. I want to tell you this. I thank you. The community thanks you. And we need to know, the community needs to know those corrections people, they are on that front line, and it's dangerous. It's dangerous because of the COVID and a lot of other things that they face day to day. I thank you. I know you're working hard. And I'll tell you what I will do as sheriff is I will empower the administration, not just me, but the administration to thank you, value you, help you in your job, and make you a priority. Make you a priority in our organization, because I do think that's what's missing. And I'm sorry to hear that that you all were not given certainly the recognition that you deserve, and you deserve it. I've been in the jail. Oh my gosh, you know, I can tell people what it's like. It's for an officer, it's a lot of work, and it's dangerous, and it's taxing. And with this COVID situation, the other way I'm going to respect you guys is I'm going to require people to wear masks. I'm going to respect the fact that your health matters. The health of the prisoners matters. Your health matters. So that we can do the best for you in that uniform. You guys wearing the black and gold, I have to tell you, you're in my heart. I think about you all the time. I do. It's one of the reasons I ran for sheriff, so that I can get back there, because I miss it. I miss it so much. I miss each and every one of you, even those guys that I don't know now, because I'm sure there's a lot of new deputies that I haven't met and so forth. And I'm really looking forward to coming back and meeting you all. And I'm looking forward to all of us. That's every one of us, jail, court service, and law enforcement, working to move in the right direction. And I want to take care of every one of our deputies, the support staff deputies, everybody, and move in the right direction. So I thank you all so much for listening to Lunchtime Live. Please keep up with my campaign, right, on Facebook, McGuffyforsheriff.com. And, you know, thank you for joining me today. If you have any suggestions at all, it's something you would like to know about or have me talk about on Lunchtime Live, hey, I'm ready. And just let me know what it is, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you all, and please stay safe.